So I think that's us. So again, just a very huge and very warm welcome to today's anti-stigma session. I'm going to open up actually with a small personal share, which is that I've been so anxious this week in the run up to the session because we had absolutely no idea what kind of response we'd get from people. We're going to be doing a lot of these sessions throughout this year, and this is the first one that we've kicked off with. So yeah, so it's been great. So I've not had any sleep this week, and I can feel some joy in my pounding heart to see so many of you joining us today. So thank you very much. What's especially good is I can see from the names that we have a good mix of people representing themselves, CME volunteers, reps from the NHS, mental health charities, carers organisations, volunteer organisations, colleges, universities, workplaces, with apologies if I've missed anyone out. I think for me, this really shows that there is such an appetite for the change that exists in the anti-stigma space in Scotland. And I think it also tells me actually how well regarded our guest organisations are across the sectors. So big thank you to all of you for being here, and special thanks to our guest speakers from two incredible organisations working in the lived experience leadership space. I think what I'm going to do just now is I'm just going to share a couple of slides just to kind of introduce you to the team and show you what the running order is for today. So I'm just going to have a wee look at slide number 1. So this is the team that are here from CME today. So a big welcome from the from the CME team. We have Anna De Silva, our communications officer. Anna's going to be operating the chat function. Lindsay Cochrane's our senior communications officer. Lindsay's going to be facilitating the Q&A session. We've got Anna Cook, who's our project officer. Anna's our safeguarding officer for today. And then we've got Sarah Harbison, our business support officer, also known as the Oracle. Sarah's going to be taking care of everything technical today. And there's myself. So I'm just going to be doing a very short introduction for the session today. So this is what it's going to look like today. So I'll do a short introduction. Our friends from Bipolar Scotland are going to be doing a presentation at 11:10. So Maya Mitchell-Grigorieva, the Impact and Development Manager for Bipolar Scotland. We've also got Jane Laidlaw, the Chief Exec. And then at 11:30, we've got Natalie Stevenson, the Manager for Vote Scotland, coming in for a presentation there. So each presentation is about 20 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So as I say, we have got some prompt questions that we had put together, but we did that just to kind of get the conversation going. But if you do have any questions, I would encourage you just to put them into the chat, and we'll try and see if we can get around to them. I know we don't have a huge amount of time today, but we'll certainly try our very best. So that's the running order for today.
Sorry for you. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. Someone had brought up that there were blocks on the screen, but I think that's just a collapsed video. Just something to keep in mind for the
Right,
future
okay.
sharing of screens.
Okie dokie. That's actually the only share that I'm going to do anyway. So I'm just going to talk to the screen, I think. So yeah, I guess just to sort of set the scene a bit, CME is Scotland's national programme to end mental health stigma and discrimination, just for anyone that doesn't know what we do or isn't familiar with the work. And across July, we've been running a kind of a small campaign just looking at public stigma and challenging people really to kind of think about how we can all do something to be part of the anti-stigma movement. The campaign has primarily been shaped and informed by people's lived and living experiences. And so if you do get the chance, do pop over to our social channels and see some of the content that we've been putting out, because it's really great. Over the years, we know there's been a huge progress in the anti-stigma space. And that programme of work doesn't sit with any one organisation. That's something that we've really come to know very acutely, like over the last sort of 20 years or so. The appetite for change is there through lived experience leadership and partnership working. And to date, we've definitely seen some really good work across policy and practice driven by this collaborative movement. The Scottish Mental Illness Study told us that there is so much to do, particularly around outcomes for people living with severe and enduring mental illness. So this year at CME, what we wanted to do was really spotlight some of the amazing work and partners doing work in this challenging space. So for today's session, we'll explore the nature and scale of stigma, but importantly, we'll also be hearing about the learning and the data, and we'll be looking at what needs to change. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our colleagues from Bipolar Scotland, Maya Mitchell-Grigorieva, and Jane Laidlaw, Chief Exec.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'm Jane Laidlaw, and I'm delighted that there's so many people joining us for this presentation today, but more importantly for the questions that will come later and the discussion that we'll all have together, because it's such an important topic for us all to be talking about. And it's certainly something in Bipolar Scotland that our members and the people that we support day in, day out share with us. So Maya and I will both speak to, we've got about a dozen slides that we'll go through. I'll do the first few and then I'll hand over to Maya. But I just want to say before we start that everything we're going to share with you today, we really want to keep lived experience right at the heart of everything we're discussing. So the examples we give and the data that we're going to share is all current. I think sometimes we would like to think that maybe stigma is a thing of the past, because we have moved considerably in the landscape in Scotland over the last 5 to 10 years in shifting the narrative around mental well-being. But mental illness, especially severe and enduring mental illness, is something that we know is still very heavily stigmatised. So things like bipolar, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder. So the examples we're going to share are from people that we've worked with very recently or are currently supporting. So I just want to start by telling you a little bit about Bipolar Scotland. We're the national charity for people living with bipolar, but not just individuals, but also for their loved ones. But we also support employers as well. So anyone who's impacted by bipolar, we want to support them to understand the condition better. We've been going now for 33 years. We are peer-led. We offer a holistic range of services, but we don't offer any clinical support. We are membership-based and we're shaped by lived experience. And our main areas of focus are post-diagnosis peer support, self-management training, peer-led workplace support, and peer support groups. I think one of the things I just want to point out, though, going back to as being peer-led and all about lived experience, 33 years ago, we started with just one support group in the West End of Glasgow, and it was literally just a few people who had bipolar meeting up. And here we are all these years later. We now have 20 support groups the length and breadth of Scotland. Some of those are in person, some are online, and some are hybrid. And we support people currently from the Orkney Islands all the way down to the Scottish borders and everything in between. So we're really delighted about the expansion of the charity over that time, because it means we're reaching more people, but it also indicates just the range geographically. There isn't a part of Scotland where people aren't affected by bipolar. So just want to tell you a little bit more about the condition and what it is, because it is still very misunderstood, and that in itself can lead to the stigma. So it affects 2 to 3% of the population, and the condition can increase the risk of suicide by up to 20 times. And it takes in Scotland an average of 10 years to be diagnosed. But the condition itself is a mood disorder, and we all have fluctuation of mood. That's just a normal part of the human condition. But with bipolar, the mood intensity is really quite drastic, and the duration of the changes in mood from highs in the mania phase to depression to the low phase of the illness can be really dramatic and can actually last for weeks or months at a time. I mean, I remember back just a few days, Monday morning, I'm never really good on a Monday morning. I'm always much brighter. towards the end of the week because I'm like, oh, it's Thursday, it's a day closer to the weekend. So my mood has changed across the week, but that's just normal for most of us. But for bipolar, it's much more dramatic, very intense, and the episodes can last a while. But I think what's also important to stress is that in the middle of that, people can have periods of wellness for a very long time. And it's not curable. This is the other thing, when you have bipolar, you can have those periods of wellness, but it's not a condition it's a condition you can absolutely live well with, but it's not something that's curable. Okay, so what does the stigma look and feel like? So we have people just now who tell us that when they come out, and this is what the terminology people use, is when they come out as bipolar, maybe to their friends, their family members, or their colleagues, people physically shrink back and they can't take away the look in their face. It's almost as if they think the condition is infectious and that they might catch it from you. So that's a really horrible first reaction. But what people believe about the condition is that you're crazy, you're unreliable, and you're potentially dangerous, but you're certainly untrustworthy. So this is what people then feel, and the impact of that stigma is that people lose confidence in themselves, in their abilities, in what they're capable of. They can become very isolated and withdrawn. That in itself can contribute to anxiety, both socially and personally. And people might feel less able to contribute or feel inhibited in the workplace. And it leads to a loss of opportunities and a sense of shame, which is really, really profound. So this is what people experience in society and even from loved ones. So here's some examples of people that we've worked with just recently, where one person said, and this is in relation to a woman talking about her relationship with her mum. She'll often tell me I'm being lazy and need to get out more, and there's a lack of understanding that these are symptoms of the condition rather than just a choice. So that's someone's own family member. And then this one is an example from a woman who has a physical disability and relies on the support of a carer to be able to lead a good life. So a lady came for an interview and started working for me until she discovered I had bipolar. She quickly fabricated an excuse and left after a month. So that person was happy to support someone with a physical disability or a physical illness, but they didn't want to know when it was revealed that that same person also lived with bipolar. And we think that's just absolutely shocking. Sadly, though, the stigma is in healthcare too, and we have lots of members who talk to us about their experience of stigma from their GP or other medical professionals. So one person was told by a neurologist that I just need to warn you, most doctors won't take you seriously now. And that was when the neurologist discovered that the person had bipolar. And then another person who was reluctant to put themselves forward for cancer treatment because they were afraid that they wouldn't be taken seriously. So I'm thinking now, I've probably gone through my share of the slides, and what I'm going to do is I'll stop and have a wee sip of my coffee. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Maya, who is the manager of our Impact and Development team.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here this morning. So as Jane says, we're a membership organisation, and that means that we pay really close attention to what our members tell us. And one of the things they've been telling us was about the high levels of inequality they were experiencing to do with their physical health and access in physical health care. So as Jane says, one of the things we did was conduct a survey, which just actually closed back in June, so it's very recent. And what we found in this survey is that 57.5% of the people we surveyed with bipolar have experienced stigma or discrimination in a healthcare setting. 45% have delayed seeking treatment due to fears about how their bipolar would be perceived by others. And 57.4% told us that they felt judged, dismissed, or treated differently by a healthcare professional just because they have bipolar. So if you think back to one of those statistics that Jane shared at the beginning of this presentation about the difference in life expectancy for people living with bipolar, I think sometimes there's a misconception that that's due to suicide, but actually we know that it's largely down to people not getting the right treatment for physical health conditions. I've got another example here from the survey that we found really quite striking, which was somebody with bipolar who went to A&E due to their symptoms, and they were dismissed as panicking and overreacting, and in reality they had sepsis. So what we really want to highlight, I suppose, is that the public stigma, the very real public stigma that people with bipolar experience in society, it can be reinforced in healthcare settings, and that can have serious consequences for people with bipolar, and in some cases, serious consequences for their health or even their life. Last year, we were hearing from a lot of people we were working with who were struggling with working alongside their condition, but the problems they were having weren't necessarily directly because of their bipolar, but actually because of other people's perceptions of what they could or couldn't do at work because of their condition. So 63% of the people we surveyed felt discriminated against at work due to their bipolar, and 65% felt they'd been overlooked for a promotion because of their bipolar. We spoke to a number of people who shared that they didn't feel able to be open with their employer about their bipolar for fear of repercussions. I've got some examples here as well. So this first one is a woman who was sacked when her employer found out about her diagnosis. And when I spoke to her about this, she shared that after she had told her boss that she had bipolar, she found that she was locked out of all of the computer systems within the organization. So she wasn't sharing with her boss because she was unwell at the moment. She was sharing to be open about something that she lived with and, might need some support with at some time. But her employer assumed that she could not be trusted, and she was eventually sacked and actually went through an employment tribunal for unfair dismissal. We have another person here who shared that stigma and lack of understanding of the condition played a role in my previous workplaces. I was taken off some duties and effectively demoted for being unreliable after just 3 short absences in a year. The impact of this is very real for people and can be devastating. So, as we've discussed, people can fear job loss or their career being stalled. They can experience poor mental health from feeling that they have to hide their diagnosis. And there's also that real sense of lost potential and also economic cost, because what we strongly believe is that employers are they're missing out, because the people we know with bipolar are, some of the most creative, resilient, talented people who have so much to bring to workplaces. And it's trying to get across to people, I think, that, somebody has bipolar, but they are not bipolar. They are so much more to that. And what they can bring to a job or to a relationship or, to other things in society is so much more. What I also wanted to highlight is that we were delighted earlier this year to actually get some funding from the Alliance for a brand new peer-led, self-management focused project on supporting people with bipolar in the workplace. And part of what we're going to be doing with that project is connecting people with peer workers and peer volunteers who have lived experience of managing their job alongside their bipolar, to support them to challenge things like discrimination and stigma in the workplace. So we're just getting ready to launch that project, but really excited to see what comes of that. As Jane highlighted earlier, a lot of the work that we do is really focused on peer support. And I think what we just wanted to highlight really during this presentation is the role of peer support in combating stigma. What we found is that peer support can really validate people's experiences. It can help to rebuild their confidence after experiencing, horrific stigma and discrimination. And I think what our peer supporters do is they model recovery and they also promote a sense of hope for what the future can look like. I think that peer support as well, it's sort of it can be quite transformational because it it recognizes lived experience as expertise. And I think for people who have maybe been used to being part of the more traditional mental health model of support, it can just be completely transformational. And so I think that with our peer workers and peer volunteers, what they are doing is they are, really actively and prominently, they are breaking that perception that people with bipolar are incapable or unstable or have to be dependent on others to stay well. And I think what they're also doing is they're helping to challenge that internalized stigma that we know people can experience. So people talk to us a lot about the self-stigma of living with a condition like bipolar. And a lot of what we do around our self-management and our peer support is looking at, compassion for yourself. So we strongly feel that stigma is about more than just attitudes. We want to see a change in policies and systems, and we strongly believe that people with lived experience need to be part of designing, delivering, and leading that change. And what people with bipolar have told us that what they want to see and what would make the biggest difference from them is to have a greater visibility of real bipolar experiences. So, for example, the great work that See Me is doing in trying to amplify voices of lived experience. So I know a lot of our members were able to share some of their experiences that were then shared as part of your campaign. It's about embedding lived experience into accessible training, whether that's training for employers or even training for healthcare workers. We know that, because of the diagnosis delay, there's still a lack of understanding in primary care settings about what bipolar can look like and how it can present. And that ultimately can prevent people from getting access to the right support and treatment they need to feel better. We also really strongly want to see investment in peer-led models of support. We see every day the impact of peer support in challenging stigma and in helping build people's confidence to lead the life that they really want to lead. And what people tell us is that they want people to look beyond the label and not make assumptions just because somebody has bipolar. We have got over 1,000 members in Scotland, and each of them are unique. They've all got their own stories, their own experiences. Bipolar will look very different from person to person. And so it is just about trying to see people as people and not just as bipolar. We are delighted that in October, on the 9th of October this year, we are hosting a large conference in Edinburgh called Time for Transformation. This is going to be a really great opportunity, we think, to explore the real challenges facing people with bipolar and how we can build change. And we're going to have amazing guest speakers and workshops that are going to cover things like, the stigma that people tell us about in the workplace and healthcare and in everyday life. These workshops are going to be led by people with lived experience, and we're going to really focus on action. What action can we take to make things better? Our conference is open to anyone who cares about what we do, whether you live with bipolar, whether you know someone else who does, whether you just work in the mental health field, or you're just interested in what we're doing. Everybody is welcome. We want to have a really big range of diverse voices on the day. So I would encourage all of you to scan the QR code or go to our website to find out more about the conference, and we would love to see some of you there if you wanted to join us. That is everything from us just now. We're of course happy to take questions, but I put my contact details in the chat earlier, and you've also got our contact details on screen. So Jane and I are always happy to hear from people who maybe want to know more about what we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Jane. That was incredible. That was such a great presentation. And it's so amazing to see the focus on lived experience and peer support. And what you were saying there, actually, there was a lot of similarities I could see with a lot of the data that we have or that we got back from the mental illness stigma study. Definitely lots of similarities there. I know we're just a wee bit a minute over time. I don't know, does anyone have any sort of questions for Maya and Jane at the moment? We are going to questions after Natalie, but just in case there were any sort of burning questions that anyone wanted to pop their hand up, or is everyone happy to go to Natalie?
There was one question that popped up in the chat. Someone was wanting to know what age group it is you work with at Bipolar Scotland.
We work with adults, so at the moment it's 16 plus.
I just want to say one of the reasons for that is because it's so difficult to get a diagnosis, that people are not usually diagnosed until they're in their 40s. Or thereabouts, although the onset of the first symptoms tends to be in adolescence, round about puberty.
Just want to ask, sorry, will you be putting up these slides, or will we be able to access them? Because there's a lot of really good information we might use in training.
We're happy to share slides. Lindsay, I don't know if that's something you guys are able to share afterwards.
Yeah, we can. We'll send out an email following the session, which will have a short evaluation survey, but also link to the video of today's session, and we can send on slides as part of that as well.
Thank you.
Oh, I think we're just about ready. Thanks, Maya and Jane. That was amazing. I think we're ready just to move on to Natalie Stevenson from Vox Scotland. So welcome, Natalie. Hi.
Hi, can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I just need to work out how to move them on. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's so nice to be here, and yeah, nice to be following a presentation from Bipolar Scotland as well. Hopefully I'll be able to share some different things with you today. But first of all, I guess I should introduce Voices of Experience Scotland. We are Scotland's national organisation for collective advocacy for people living with mental illness. We're also member-led. So we're led by people with lived experience of mental ill health, and we listen to our members, and we try and amplify their voices and influence change in Scottish Government, influence change in policy and practice, so that things get better for people living with mental ill health. I'm just going to play a short 90-second animation, which is narrated by some of our members, because it explains who and what Vox is much better than I can. I know some of you might have seen this before, but I appreciate that some people on the call might not know us, so I'll let them introduce you to Vox.
Voices of Experience, known as Vox Scotland, is Scotland's national collective advocacy organisation for mental health.
Established in 2006, we are run for and by our members who all have lived experience or living experience of mental ill health.
You can join Vox Scotland for free as an individual, group or associate member. Our members can be as involved as they want to be, choosing to contribute views, experiences and insights if, when and how they want, and with the right support they need to do so.
They can also take part in training, members' meetings, AGMs and events, and everyone receives our weekly newsletter.
Our strength comes from our members, and we represent their views, interests and priorities to Scottish Government, the NHS and others to influence mental health policy and practice to try to make it work better for everyone. Our members are the driving force behind our work and are at the heart of who we are and what we do. Join Vox Scotland now and be part of the change we want to see in Scotland on mental health.
Vox Scotland gives me a sense of community, understanding and change in the unforgiving world of mental health.
Vox Scotland has simply given me the opportunity to be in a community where each voice is heard and valued.
Okay, I always like starting with that because I think it introduces our organisation really well. So I was going to think today on a couple of questions, thinking about the stigma and how it can particularly affect people who are living with severe or complex mental illness. Thinking about the role of us, of Vox, and of lived experience in general in tackling that stigma, and similarly to Bipolar Scotland, reflecting on some of the things that maybe could change and how we can achieve that. So where to start with stigma and how it affects people living with mental illness? I decided to put this image on the screen, hopefully one that resonates with many of you and you'll recognise. It's Lewis Capaldi giving an interview in 2022, where he had just recently been diagnosed with Tourette's. And the reason I wanted to put this up is because what he said in that interview is that everybody thought I was on cocaine. And he was able to speak around that quite openly and publicly, and in a way laugh about it. And I guess that kind of comes from the fact that as someone in the music industry and in the public eye, maybe is it okay? Everybody thought I was on cocaine. But what I really wanted to reflect on is how that would feel for Lewis, but also for someone who's not in the music industry, who is just living in Scotland, who maybe has a diagnosis and is going around their everyday life, and the public perception of them is, oh, they must be taking drugs, they're taking cocaine, there's something else going on, rather than seeing the person and appreciating what's going on for them. So I thought it would be interesting to think about the places where people might experience stigma from the public. And I mentioned it's in your everyday life. It literally is in any space that you might spend time, particularly if you're getting public transport, if you're moving around the place you live, if you're traveling to work or to maybe appointments that you have. It's in the places where we live. It's in our actual homes, like it's in the communities, in the street that you live. We've already heard a little bit about stigma at work and in the workplaces, but it's also in any public spaces that you might want to go, in a cafe, in a library, in a cinema, the places that people go all the time as they live their lives. And in the modern day, also, of course, there is an awful lot of time that you spend in online spaces, and there's a huge amount of influence as well from the media in terms of what people are seeing and how people are reacting to you. So stigma, public stigma, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the experiences that people tell us about being treated unfairly, not being shown respect and dignity, not being included in activities, or maybe being asked to leave either an activity or a space. People not being included in decision making or being pressured into decisions that they didn't want. Seeing that hurtful, offensive, or just upsetting attitude and views or portrayals of people living with mental illness, particularly in the media, online. People having their thoughts, views, opinions just dismissed or not taken seriously. And echoing again what Bipolar Scotland said, unfortunately receiving inappropriate or inadequate care, service or support, particularly when you're accessing potentially healthcare services or other services, because of mental illness. So I tried to think of some examples here of how people feel in some of these situations, and I tried to give an example here for each. So in terms of traveling on public transport, someone might feel quite nervous getting on a bus. So I feel quite nervous getting on a bus on my own. So I normally go with someone. I'm just worried that I maybe have some sort of panic attack. And then in the spaces that people are traveling to, when I go to the pharmacy, I'm always treated with so much stigma and judgment and made to stand outside even when it's raining. And in the media and online, particularly in the news, perhaps, people are portrayed as dangerous and capable of doing wrong things and self-inflicted choices. And I think particularly with so much online space at the moment, people tend to have this, or speak to this quote in terms of, it's just part and parcel of going online that you're expected to encounter trolls. Like, is that okay? I wanted to reflect a bit of a balanced view in that some people feel that it is okay. Maybe they are, people do care and they are treated with patience, and allowed to take time if they have mental health issues. So the quote at the bottom is from someone who chose to use the sunflower mental health lanyard in situations where they might feel anxious. But of course, everyone is different, and that's the big importance about lived experience. No one experience is the same as someone else, and many of our members may not want to identify in that way. They may not want to wear a lanyard, and they may not, that might not be appropriate for them. So it has to be okay for everyone, no matter how they experience mental illness or how they want to go forwards. So I thought I would share this kind of very recent news article to just kind of highlight particularly the impact of what's said in the public, to then what happens down the line in terms of people's experience and policy and things that can really impact people's lives. So 3 sentences on the screen. Psychiatric disorders now make up 39% of claims. And this is, of course, talking about welfare benefits. So 39% of people have psychiatric disorder. And literally the 3rd sentence in that it is a quote from Keir Starmer saying that he's going to crack down hard on the bulging benefits bill blighting our society. So am I a blight on society? Like, and obviously we know this is a conversation, it's public stigma playing out, but it has real world implications. The government are looking at welfare reform. It really matters for people in their lives, and what happens to them going forwards. So what is the impact of public stigma for people living with mental illness? This is a quote from a Vox member. I have ASD, ADHD, EUPD. I've been called loser, monster, a vast range of negative labels. How can I ever get better when constantly hearing these things, not only from the general public, but from the people who are meant to help? How can I ever get better when I'm constantly hearing these things? This person isn't just speaking about how they react in that moment. This person is speaking about the impact on their health, their ability to recover because of the things that they are constantly hearing when they go about their day-to-day lives. So what's the role of Vox and lived experience in tackling stigma? Well, when we talk to people, and again, we're in peer support settings, we hear a lot about people saying we know it's okay to live with mental illness, and that awareness has come a long way. But people are still saying that they're experiencing stigma from healthcare workers or in the workplace. And so they are reluctant to disclose their diagnosis, even though they might encourage others or applaud others to do so. And that's the real effect of stigma. So we think that by sharing the voices of people living with mental illness, we can make a difference. We can increase awareness of the variety and fluctuations in mental health. So many different types of diagnosis that someone might have. Different mental illnesses will look different. And as Jane said, for bipolar, sometimes you may be well, and other times you may be unwell. We work to try and ensure that people are given time, space, and compassion. And as I said, Vox does a lot of work to try and influence Scottish Government's shaping policy and design of delivery of services. And the other thing we can do is campaign when we see public stigma playing out in the media or in politics. So, for example, responding to things like welfare reform consultations and trying to oppose the stigma that we've seen playing out in that kind of space. And also, of course, creating peer support and safe places for people. So what needs to change, and how can we achieve it? Just a couple of thoughts from me. Resources. We do go back to it a lot, but better funding for services can help us have less pressure within the workforce and less pressure within society in general, hopefully enabling space for people to explore stigma, question stigma, attend training, think about the way that services are being delivered. But when everything is so pressured in terms of having available resource for that, it's often the resources are used as the excuse for not tackling stigma. And there shouldn't ever be an excuse, but poorly funded services definitely don't help. I think having really strong leadership, having leaders in all organisations that prioritise culture change across their organisations, but also across society. Obviously work to raise awareness and understanding, so that might be education, but also offering training alongside people with lived experience. And really lived experience has to be at the heart of service design and policy making, and we need to listen to people who have lived experience of mental illness. And I just thought I would leave with this one quote, again, speaking to stigma. Why do I automatically feel shame when I see my diagnosis on the screen at the doctor's office? It really is something that people living with mental illness are facing all the time. And again, I would say definitely in healthcare settings, again, is something where we see people mention the impact of stigma a lot. So I've probably rattled through that very fast, but that's all that I had. I'm looking forward to the conversation and discussion. If you want to get in touch with Vox, or please do join our organisation. The details are on the screen, and I'm sure these will be shared afterwards as well.
Thanks, Natalie. That was great. Just there's two things that instantly were just coming to mind when you were talking there was just, and also thinking about Jane and Maya's presentation was, I guess the idea that stigma and discrimination impacts on pretty much every part of someone's life. And that can be in lots of different ways, but also like that really important role for lived experience leadership and kind of leading the anti-stigma movement and creating change. So I think, yeah, that was amazing. Thank you, Natalie. I think we're just going to hand over to Lindsay and Anna now just for the question session now, because yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Fee. Yeah, and thank you, Jane, Maya, and Natalie for those presentations. I think you've helped to give a really clear picture of what stigma looks and feels like for people as well, and the real impact that that can have, and just how important lived experience and listening to people's experiences and stories and how they feel is in tackling that stigma. So we've got some questions for the three of you now, but if there's anything else that people here today would like to know about, any questions that are on your mind, please do pop it in the chat. We've only got a little 10 minutes left, but we'll try to get through as much as we can today. So just to kind of start things off, for Natalie, start with, what would you say is the real world impact of stigma on the people that you work with?
I think I found that quote I shared really powerful in terms of how can I recover. So I think stigma's really stopping people from living a full life. And I think it was mentioned a wee bit in the bipolar presentation, just a wee nod to self-stigma as well. I think when you're surrounded by public stigma, then you're also likely to internalize that, and that will become self-stigma. And I think this is some of the kind of the circle that then impacts on your life. So yeah.
Yeah, it holds people back, doesn't it? It's yeah, big impact. Maya, Jane, have you anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to come in and say is that people that we work with at Bipolar Scotland, very often when they're in the phase of their illness, when they're functioning really well and might be in a sort of high episode, they're very high achievers. They can take on the world. They're incredibly productive. They're extremely creative. they're sharp-witted, they're intelligent, they're focused, they are managers, they're CEOs, they're business people. Currently our board of trustees all have bipolar. Every one of them has a PhD. You know, they're academics, they're brilliant, but still the stigma holds them back. And they're the people who maybe have had a sort of nurturing environment and the opportunities to do well, and maybe didn't come up against the stigma, or maybe were diagnosed late, so didn't experience the stigma till later on. But people who are diagnosed and are living with the condition are not always getting the chance to excel and really realize their true potential, because they contribute enormous amounts to society, and could do more if we stopped stigmatizing them. So, and I think that's true for any severe and enduring mental illness. People still have the capacity to give and be effective members of society, but the stigma is a huge barrier and stops people reaching their potential.
Absolutely, I think that's something we at CME would definitely agree with as well. Maya, had you anything to add? So you sort of moved towards your...
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said. I just think, it's really encouraging to see so many people here today talking about stigma, because I was really struck by, Natalie, what you shared in your presentation, particularly about the language being used right now. Whether that's politically or just, yeah, there's a lot of language right now that I think is really unfair and really lacks empathy and compassion. And I think all of us can play a role in challenging that just in our everyday lives when we see that or hear that, because the effects on people at an individual level is just, I mean, it can be devastating.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're seeing at CME. It feels like just now in particular, there's been a bit of a shift. I think during the pandemic, we saw this kind of upswing of support for mental health generally. Would you say that you're seeing a difference in that? Have things changed? Have things got better or worse? What would you say?
Yeah, I think Jane and I were talking about this yesterday, and in terms of like stigma with bipolar, I think there is just so much. People don't know what bipolar really is. And again, going back to what Natalie shared, I guess some of the, things that are shared in media and stuff doesn't help. There's a lot of misinformation online. Um, I do also want to share, some of you might have seen the Heston Blumenthal documentary on BBC recently, which I think was really powerful, because that is someone who is very successful in what he does, and kind of showing the reality of what living with bipolar is like. And I think things like that can be quite powerful, because it can change people's perceptions of what something is or isn't.
I think that one thing that we've noticed is that there's greater awareness of mental health and well-being, but there is a growing disconnect, or just a growing gap between how different illnesses are portrayed and the amount of stigma that is there. So it's much harder for someone with severe or enduring mental ill health. It's much less accepted. There's much higher levels of stigma than maybe someone who might have a diagnosis of anxiety or depression. And the openness that people say that has kind of grown from the pandemic is more around talking about mental well-being and self-care like that. It is not about the realities of living with a severe and enduring mental illness. So it's almost like the positives, and you'd never take away the positives of greater awareness of mental health. But the flip of that is that the gap is growing for people living with severe and enduring mental ill health.
Absolutely. And what do you, I think you all touched on this in your presentations, but what do you think needs to change to make that stigma and discrimination a thing of the past?
Yeah, I think as Maya said, it's about public awareness, education, and the fact that so many people that we support spoke to us about stigma from healthcare professionals shows you that the people we naturally would think we go to with a problem, we're in crisis, you turn to health, you go to your GP, those are the professionals who you might experience the most stigma from. So even the people who are supposed experts of healthcare in their field, there's education needed there. You know, how do we educate the workforce of primary care, because that's the first port of call for most people when they're unwell.
And I would absolutely agree with that, Jane. I think education is such a huge thing. The work we've done recently found that 9 in 10 people with a severe and enduring mental illness have faced stigma from their family and their friends. So it's the people closest to you. It's all these resources and people that you would turn to for support who are being influenced by these external sources in terms of how they perceive mental illness. And that's the worrying bit. So education is definitely a big part for us too. Natalie, have you any thoughts on what needs to change?
Yeah, I think that leadership, and that can be lived experience leadership. So people speaking and challenging what they see. But also, yeah, that education piece and particularly in services, I mentioned the kind of resource demands. People go into healthcare because they care. But there's something that we have, particularly at the economic crisis, that kind of economic situation that we're in at the moment, where there's no space, it feels, for compassion, or there's no space for training, or there's no space because everything has to be done. And I think when the system is quite so pressured, it kind of almost is not allowing, it's almost creating that kind of situation where stigma can exist.
Absolutely. I'm very conscious of time. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So yeah, I think we'll probably wrap it up there with the questions. Thank you all so much for your time today and for taking your time to consider this. I'll hand back over to Fiona.
Thanks everyone. That's been so great today. Thanks for everyone for coming along, and thanks to Maya, Jane and Natalie for your contributions. There's definitely been lots of food for thought there, and certainly lots of stuff that has made me think about things. I'll go away and reflect after today. We'll obviously, having recorded the session, we will send it round for anyone who would like a copy, and we'll have it on the website as well, so it will be available for people. And the other thing I was going to say is we're actually hosting a few of these sessions across the year. Anna Cook, I'm going to completely put you on the spot. I'd meant to get details from you about your team's session that you're hosting. So I don't know if you know the detail of that, if you want to just mention that today so that people can potentially get it in their diaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not entirely sure of the date, but it's the end of August. I think the last week of August, and it's going to be a sort of introduction to intersectional stigma, and an intersectional approach to tackling stigma. So obviously I'm biased, but it should be quite interesting, and we would love to see some of you there.
That's great. So what I'd maybe encourage folks to do actually in that case is, obviously we spoke about what people can do. If you head across to the See Me website, on our See Us pages, and there are tons and tons and tons of resources that you can use, whether you're an individual human or whether you want to do something in your community, whether you're an employer in a health setting, whatever your role is, there's something there in that landing page for you to use. So do get involved, and also you can sign up for our newsletter as well. So you'll get all the first bits of See Me news and dates and events and all that sort of stuff straight to your inbox. So yeah, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for coming along today. Massive thanks to Jane, Maya and Natalie. I hope you've enjoyed the session. Hope you've all got something out of it. I've seen loads of connections being made in the chat, so I hope that continues on beyond today. So yeah, thank you everyone, and take care.